Good afternoon. This is now week 5 of Social Work 636, and week 5 begins the more difficult assignments that will result in the grant proposal as the final assignment for this class. So week 5 concentrates on organizations and management goals, goal attainment, and strategic planning, which will be the focus for this week. So let's go to the introduction. So for week 5, the introduction is that we are examining organizational goals and strategic planning. The session addresses the purposes and values of goals as well as the special value of strategic planning. The process of strategic planning is also examined. The learning objectives are as follows. After completing the activities this week, you should be able to articulate the purposes of organizational goals, articulate the purposes of strategic plans, and then to write a strategic plan. So let's now look at the learning materials in particular. In the Brody and Nair text, it is chapters 2, 3, 4, and 12. There are additional outside readings on how to set strategic goals, how do groups react to unexpected threats and crisis management in organizational teams, Latino faces, corporate ties, Latino advocacy, organizations and their board membership, and the last reading, my colleagues do not think the same. Middle managers shared and separate realities in strategy implementation. There is one video for this week, how to create a strategic plan. It is a longer video, but if you go through that video, it will help you in terms of the assignment this week. There are slides that we will go through also about strategic plans. And the discussion post for this week is specifically around strategic planning. So you're going to be preparing to assist your organization in the development of a strategic plan. For each of the following domains, provide at least 4 questions that would help your organization develop its plan. For each, identify at least one source of data that would be helpful in answering the questions. For this assignment, you do not need to collect the information. So if you've had a field placement, this could be your placement agency. For others, it could be a current, past, or future employment organization or volunteer site. For still others, it could be an organization or agency of particular interest to you. The better you know the agency, the greater your access to the agency, the easier the course assignments will be for you to complete in the future. So in your initial post, you're going to include questions and sources of evidence for all of the following domains, and that is the organization's strengths, its weaknesses, its challenges, and its opportunities. Strengths, weaknesses, challenges, and opportunities. So 4 questions in each of those domains. You're going to respond to at least one of your classmates. So your initial post is due by Thursday, and your follow-up is due by Sunday. I want to also make you aware that in week 6, you are going to have the assignment of completing a capacity assessment paper. So it's worth briefly going over what that looks like. And so for that capacity assessment paper, this assignment is closely connected to the final proposal. Your task in week 6 is to examine the organization for which you will write the program grant proposal and determine the capacity of the organization to seek new funding to expand its services through a grant. Again, you may choose any agency or organization, but the better you know this organization, the easier it would be to complete this assignment. The primary tasks for this assignment are to understand the organization better and to assess the organization's capacity to carry out a proposed program. Much of the descriptive information you gather will also be included in the proposal, so quality work is to your benefit. You are encouraged to utilize online resources, agency brochures, and/or annual reports, and interviews with clients, staff, and supervisors in order to obtain the needed information. Thus, you want to write in an academic narrative format with citations as necessary, as opposed to a personal opinion paper or simply answering the questions. So this is an academic paper, not just a question and answer paper. This is not your opinion. This is based on fact. If you plan to focus on a large organization with many units, for example, you might want to begin with a brief overview of the large setting, but focus the analysis on a particular unit within the larger organization. So this is a 4 to 7 page paper report, and you can use headings as necessary, but you're answering the questions around organizational description, the organizational structure and program, the organizational environment, the organizational capacity, strengths, and challenges, some of which you looked at for this week in week 5. So for the guidelines, your report paper must be in a narrative format with necessary headings and subheadings. Again, do not respond with question and answer or an outline format. Use references in support of what you are saying in this paper. It has to include necessary citations, and this is not an I or me or an opinion paper. So this paper will be due the Sunday of week 6. If you have questions about this, please get to me as quickly as possible. So again, this is week 6, just thinking ahead. So let's first go over the slides that are provided for this week before we go into my PowerPoint. So what is strategic planning? It's the big picture of what your organization is doing and where it is going. It helps determine where your organization is going over the next year or more. And then why is this important? It takes you outside of the day-to-day activities of your organization and helps you think about its future. Strategic planning models are goal-based, which is the most common. It works with the agency vision, mission, and the agency goals to work towards achieving that mission. Issue-based starts with examining issues that the organization is facing. Organic, the focus is primarily on vision and values and scenario. What are some of the components of a strategic plan? The vision, developing a clear understanding of what is your preferred future. The mission, developing a sound statement about why you exist, or again, reconfirming that your mission is still relevant for today and today's times and into the future. To look at core values and beliefs, which describe behaviors and ideas that are important to your organization. Looking at strategic issues, the issues that create a gap between the ideal and reality, and operational plans. How are you going to achieve your vision? What are some of the steps in strategic planning? Looking at where your agency is in its development right now, assessing the internal and external environment, doing a SWOT analysis, which are strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. How do you do a SWOT analysis? Step 1, in the here and now, list all the strengths that now exist. Then in turn, list all weaknesses that exist. Be realistic. Step 2 is what might be. List all the opportunities that exist in the future. Opportunities are potential future strengths. Then in turn, list all those threats. Step 3 is to develop a plan of action. And step 4, to develop operational plans, monitor actions, evaluate progress, and then revise that plan. Other steps, again, creating a vision, defining core beliefs and values, and identify your agency's mission as we identified before. Look at critical strategic issues and develop goals and detailed action plans for each of those strategic issues. Steps in strategic planning continued. Monitor the action plans your agency has developed in response to the critical issues. Evaluate progress and revise the plan as needed. And this is a data source for the development of strategic planning. Now let's move on to looking at the PowerPoint 636 Week 5. Strategic planning. Strategic planning describes the process of addressing change. It looks at the development of goals accompanied by a set of actions to help achieve those goals, and produces a product, a strategic plan, which is the result of a process of engaging stakeholders. So the first task is to get organized. And getting organized means that all staff and board members must be engaged, must be realistic about the time commitment for this plan, and must establish ground rules of participation that emphasize decisions made by consensus. A next step is conducting an analysis. That means to lay a proper foundation. It provides the group with common understanding of the organization's past, current operation, values, etc. It reviews services provided, staffing patterns, and finances, gathers facts such as demographics, political, and economic data for the service area, and conducts a competitive analysis with similar organizations. Mission statement is a very important part of strategic planning. It may or may not be changed, but should be reviewed as part of the process. The mission statement is the purpose of the organization, and it should only change after extensive input by stakeholders. And as an aside, a mission statement in an organization should be visible everywhere. Staff should know the mission, should be able to articulate that mission. Missions are short statements, so that if someone was in an elevator and said, "I like your mission, could you tell me that mission one more time?" you should be able to do that. Fundamental questions in strategic planning. What business are we in? What business should we be in? And what business do we want to be in a few years down the road? The strategic planning process should entail a SWOT analysis, and that's looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats or challenges. So in that assessment, we review programs and services to determine whether each one can be justified in relation to the mission. Examine the structure of every level of the organization, including job description, staff responsibility, and formal processes. We identify significant community trends and issues that might impinge on the organization's functioning and carefully examine the extent to which other organizations are duplicating services or competing for funding or the same clients. In drafting the strategic plan, again, we look at mission statement, we look at vision. The reading didn't talk so much about values, but we should also be doing a value statement, looking at goals, objectives, and action steps, internal strengths and weaknesses, and looking at external opportunities and challenges, examining critical issues, and determining accountability and the timetable for achieving and dealing with those identified critical issues. So how do we develop consumer-oriented programs? The reading talks about the development of a logic model. And the logic model notes inputs that are current inputs and resource inputs, notes throughputs or interventions or processes the agency provides for clients, and uses symbols on the logic model to describe client pathways. So the logic model is a picture that gives the inputs and throughputs by which we can follow how client A enters the system, accesses certain services, and along what pathways things have to happen in order for that client to be successfully granted resources through the organization. Establishing initial, intermediate, and long-range goals. Initial outcomes are the first benefits clients experience and are most related to program outputs. Intermediate outputs link the program's initial outcomes to long-term change, and long-term outcomes are those changes in the client's quality of life that are measured at a designated follow-up point. So how do we evaluate outcomes? The logic planning model provides a way for both managers and outside funders to evaluate the extent to which the organization achieves its intended impact. The logic model helps managers critically examine how inputs, throughputs, and outcomes are connected, and it pays attention to the external market of referral sources, policymakers, administrators, and funders. How do we engage in the implementation of action plans and problem solving? Well, we have to first understand the difference between goals and objectives. Goals are long-term, what we hope to achieve, but are not generally measurable because they're not written in measurable language. To achieve a high quality of life is not something that is measurable, but it could be a goal for an organization. Objectives, on the other hand, represent relative, attainable, measurable, and time-limited ends to be achieved, so we can measure them and determine whether they have been accomplished. And they should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-specific. And again, that is often called the SMART objectives. Kinds of objectives: we can measure impact, which specify outcomes to be achieved as a result of program activities. We can measure service, or the organization's tally of activities provided or services rendered. So we said we were going to serve 150 people and we served 175. So we have more than met that objective. And then we have operational objectives, and they convey the intent to improve the general operation of the organization. Change. Change is nothing less than constant. So how do we manage change? The reading talked about the tipping point theory, when the beliefs and energies of a critical mass of people are engaged in an organization, at that point, new ideas will spread, bringing about change. Managers often must maintain existing programs while starting new ones. Resistance can be seen as a negative or a positive, but it does indicate that there may be some problem in implementing new ideas. When that occurs, we have to examine staff skills, look at the organizational culture, what's the feasibility of the projects that have been proposed, do we have enough money to make the changes happen, what is going on in the marketplace, and look at the risk of mission drift. Have we added new programs in order to secure funding, but those programs do not necessarily fit the mission of the organization? This is one key factor in why some nonprofits fail, because they engaged in mission drift. Another way to manage change is to engage in problem solving, which would be to analyze, consider alternatives, make decisions, monitor the results, and make corrections as needed. How do you manage risk? You ask a series of questions. Does your decision increase something of value? Is a decision of such minimal consequence that it can be made quickly and at the lowest point possible within the organization? Can the decision be considered experimental, and can it be developed and funded? Are the potential negative consequences worth it? Can commitments be made incrementally so that we experience change over time? Are persons responsible able to carry out the decision? And is there a workable exit strategy if all this does not work? So how do you work with a board of directors? The reading talked about a board of trustees. Often in nonprofits, we talk about a board of directors. So the major roles are governance and fiduciary, and not day-to-day management. If your board is involved in day-to-day management, there is a real problem. Specific roles and responsibilities are outlined in the agency bylaw. So the power of committee, the power of the executive committee, what the board can and cannot decide upon, those should be specified in the bylaws. Terms, how many board members, and what to do if a board member is either causing disruption on the board or just doesn't come to meetings. Working with the board means maintaining continuous communication so that role clarity is clear. Prevent staff from dominating discussions at board meetings. The board chair runs that meeting, not the executive director who is staff to the board. There is a focus on substantive policy issues and strategic plan development, and in most nonprofits, it is the executive director who would at least be providing fiscal and program reports for the board. The goal is to have the board always aware of what's going on within an organization. Other board roles and responsibilities are to help in determining mission goals and strategic planning, to understand the organization as they are its representatives out in the community, to be responsive, that they are the ones that select, support, and evaluate the executive director. The board supervises the executive director, provides fiscal oversight and engages in fundraising, develops personnel policies, and the board might be in the chain of command for appeals for decisions of firing, for example. That sometimes is written into the personnel policy, or they may be a place of appeal in terms of whistleblower policies or other policies in the organization a member of the board chair, or a committee chairperson might be in that chain for appeals. Another area is ensuring proper legal and financial obligations. So with that, this information was taken from chapters 2, 3, 4, and 12 of the reading for this week in Effectively Managing and Leading Human Service Organizations. So if you have any questions for the assignment for this week, please let me know as soon as possible. Start to think about your assignment in week 6, because that is the first paper due for this class. I look forward to reading your post for this week and hope that you have a wonderful week.